I will tell you my story. It's not very long. It started a week ago. I don't know why or how. I didn't upset some witch, and I didn't go skinny dipping in a pool of nuclear waste or anything like that. Sometimes, terrible things happen without reason, and this is one of them. I shot awake at 12:42 a.m. with the urgent need to urinate. I waddled into the bathroom, pulled out my package, and just stood there. Nothing came out. "Come on, buddy," I muttered to my member. "What's the deal? Thought you had to do some business here." No response. I gave it a little shake. "Come on now, don't have all night. Big meeting in the morning. Gotta get some sleep." I was about ready to put it away and chug a glass of water when I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my inner thigh. It made me hunch over, and I smacked my forehead on the toilet lid. "Fuck," I muttered, straightening out. I dropped my boxers in order to inspect what was going on down there. I thought maybe a pimple had burst or something like that. Gross. But not as gross as what I saw. Something was poking around under my skin. It looked like it was a crawling worm, twisting away just beneath the surface. "Nope," I said. "Just a little sleep deprivation. There's not really something moving inside of me." As if to prove me wrong, my flesh started stretching, like something inside was pushing it further and further outward. This event was accompanied by a flash of burning and unforgiving pain. I screamed and bucked all the way to the ground, arching my back like the letter C. My wife Jess called out from the bedroom a moment later. "Honey, everything okay in there? I told you not to eat the chili after you left it out all night." My daughter Allie joined in from her room. "Papa, you shouldn't have eaten that chili." "I'm okay," I lied. "Go back to sleep, girls." Then, as in the eye of a storm, everything settled down. I still felt like I had to pee, but the weird movement had stopped, but only for a moment. And the following moment brought with it a torrent of misery and horror unlike anything I had ever known. A fleshy knob burst from the inside of my thigh with a gush of pink slime. I had two thoughts in quick succession. First, it's a dick. Then, no, it's a nightmare. This isn't happening. As my mind was turning things over, my mouth was screaming again. I don't know how long that went on, but eventually Jess was banging at the door. "Henry, are you okay? Henry!" "Get a knife," I wailed. "Cut it off. Oh God, kill it, please." "I'm coming in," warned Jess. "No," I cried, but it was too late. She had opened the door, taken one look at the scene before her, and covered her mouth in shock. "I don't know what's happening," I sobbed. Then a jet of yellow fluid shot from the head of the thing, and I could no longer pretend that it wasn't a second penis. The physical release of the urine felt supremely satisfying, and for a split second, I felt actually content, until I felt the warmth of my own piss pool around my knees. "Is that?" started Jess. Yes, I said. "I don't know where it came from. Oh God, I'm a monster." "What do we do? Call 911? No, it's too embarrassing, and I'm so tired. I just want to go to sleep and deal with it in the morning." I got cleaned up and settled back into bed. I was actually able to sleep for a little bit. I think because of all the adrenaline burst wore me out. I had nightmares of dicks sprouting out all over my body. One coming out of my chest, one coming out of my forehead, dripping in brain, but I was able to sleep. In the morning, it was gone. Even though it would have been hard to miss, I still spent several minutes searching all the folds down there for some sign of it. "Where did it go?" asked Jess. "I don't know," I said. "But you did see it, right? That wasn't just some nightmare, right?" "Not unless two people can have the same nightmare." "Can they?" I wondered. "I guess it's possible. No less strange than another cock poking out of your thigh for the night and then disappearing, if you think about it." "True," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe it crawled off somewhere. Maybe it was some kind of alien monster that only took form of a cock." "Maybe," said Jess. "You better get moving. You're going to be late for your meeting." I did get ready, and I'll tell you this, I felt great. It felt great not having a random second penis flopping around on my body. It was one of the best feelings in the world. But that night, it came back. The second night was no picnic either, but nothing will ever be as terrifying to me as the first night. And I'll tell you the rest of the story. It's not so bad. After it was accepted that this was going to keep happening every night, it's not so bad at all. There's a saying that I consider one of the wisest among sayings. It goes like this: happy wife, happy life. And well, let me put it like this: I have a very happy wife. I didn't plan to tell anyone about this, much less anonymous users on an internet forum. But I've seen the other posts, and I have to come forward. I got pregnant at Disneyland and gave birth there 2 days later. Splash Mountain, Kenny said, pointing up to the sign. "You really liked it yesterday. Wanna ride it again?" "Yesterday? We didn't go on that yesterday." Yeah we did." I shrugged. "Okay, sure." I didn't want to get into an argument with Kenny. It was our honeymoon, after all. As we entered, nothing looked familiar to me. Not the path through the cave. Not the hollowed out tree trunk. And waiting in line wasn't exactly fun. I heard a father shouting, "Reenie, get over here," a few times, breaking the mood. And this tall man wearing a fedora kept staring at me. He kinda creeped me out. We finally hit the front of the line. The water lapped around the sides of the boat. A thin drizzle of rain fell through the openings of the fake cave. Thunder rumbling in the background, distant and eerie. I didn't think it was supposed to storm, I thought. I checked the weather and it was sunny and 82 degrees. "How many?" the cast member asked, but then his dark eyes lit with recognition. "Oh, it's you guys again. Enjoying your honeymoon?" I just stood there, at a loss for words. If we didn't go on this ride yesterday, how come he remembers us? We climbed into the boat, front row this time, Kenny said excitedly, looking around at the water, but his voice sounded muffled, far away. The thunder rumbled again, closer this time. The pattering rain drummed in my ears, like the throbbing of my heart. Chink, chink, chink. The boats climbed the hill, entering a cave tunnel. The sounds faded into the distance. As we sped down the other side, I felt a wave of nausea. "Kara, are you okay?" I nodded, but as we twisted around the curve, I felt it again. I took in a deep breath of fresh air. Just motion sickness, I bet. We slowly floated around a fake briar patch. I stared at it, trying to swallow the urge to vomit. The thick brown vines curled around each other. Thorns and leaves ran their length, adding realistic detail. Except for one. No, one was just a plain brown vine tangled up with all the rest. As I stared at it, wondering why the Disney artist had neglected that one vine, I saw it move. It wriggled in the water, almost worm-like, almost snake-like. I couldn't make out a head or a tail, a beginning or an end. The briar patch was swept out of view, and the boat careened through another fake cave. "Are you okay?" Kenny asked, but his voice sounded so far away. My eyes fell on more of the briars poking through the cave ceiling. One didn't have thorns. As I felt the vomit rise in my throat, the world faded to black. "You're pregnant." I half expected the doctor to give me a tiny set of Mickey Mouse ears, or one of those big plastic buttons they give out on birthdays and anniversaries, saying, "I'm pregnant." He was a doctor for Disneyland guests, after all. But he didn't. He just smiled. "You're about 2 months along, I'd say." 2 months. I glanced over at Kenny. That's not possible. I had my period. I drank alcohol. And most importantly, Kenny and I had only been married for 3 days. We'd need to order a full ultrasound to get an exact due date, but that's my guess. He tucked the ultrasound probe away. "Now, is there anything else I can do for you?" "No." As we left, he didn't even tell me to have a magical day. He instead hurried over to the phone and began frantically dialing a number on his phone. Must be a busy life being a Disneyland doctor. When we got to the car, the fight erupted. "Explain this to me, Kara," Kenny said. His voice was biting, hurt, angry. "You're pregnant. You've been pregnant for months, but we just got married 3 days ago. What are you implying? Do I need to say it?" He turned into the hotel parking lot. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. This has always been a sore point with Kenny. He'd saved himself for marriage. I didn't. I slept with a few boyfriends in college, but I agreed to his little shtick. Agreed not to have sex with him until our wedding night. Apparently, that was a mistake. "Clearly, the doctor's just wrong," I said. I swung the car door open. The warm night air blew over my face, through my hair. There's no other way. I didn't cheat on him. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to. Cutting out all sex for a year and a half is hell of a thing, but I didn't do it. Kenny was silent. We went to bed without so much as a kiss. Kenny fell asleep in 15 minutes. I tossed and turned for an hour. At about 3 a.m., I woke up in the middle of the night to pee. I climbed out of bed. It was difficult. My body felt heavier, somehow. Must be sore from all the walking in the park yesterday. I walked into the bathroom, flicked on the light. I looked in the mirror and screamed. My stomach was round and full, stretching thin the fabric of my tank top. It bumped the countertop, even though I was standing a foot or two away. I looked 6 or 7 months pregnant. Muffled thumps came from the other room as Kenny climbed out of bed. "Kara? Kara, what's wrong?" He found me in a crumpled heap on the floor sobbing, my arms covering my distended abdomen. I slowly removed them. I don't know what's happening," I sobbed. He lifted me from the floor, his hands on my belly. "We have to get you to a hospital," he said, still staring. And then the thing kicked. My whole belly convulsed. Kenny pulled his hands away immediately, as if I was too hot to touch. Then came the pain. A sharp, intense cramp started in my lower back and radiating to my stomach. I screamed again, and Kenny held me tight. Thump, thump, thump. A knock at the door. Thank God. We hobbled over. Kenny pulled the door open. Please, call 911. My wife, He stopped. On the other side of the door were not fellow hotel guests checking in if we were okay. No, they were some sort of operatives, officials, dressed in black suits, grim expressions on their faces. They grabbed us before we could blink, roughly pulled us by the shoulders down the carpeted hallway. I watched the paintings of Mickey Mouse go by, blurred through my tears. Where are you taking us? Kenny screamed. No reply, save for the ding of the elevator. They pulled us inside. We rocketed down. 3, 2, 1, B1, B2. The floors raced by on the screen. There weren't any floors beyond B2. No more buttons. Still, the elevator kept going down. My ears popped with the descent. When the doors finally parted, we were looking into a dark hallway, extended for miles. Take them to the park. The tallest operative commanded. We've got work to do. My unholy seductress whispered my name at night, her dark soft voice billowing out over her soft pink tongue, her tongue that emerged from her sharpened teeth and rolled over her full red lips. I won't get into when she first started appearing to me, except to say that she always came at night. It didn't matter if I locked the closet door with a deadbolt or hung crucifixes across the entryway. She came regardless. A sickly, dim red light glowed murderously through the cracks in the closet doorway, and my bedroom grew pungent with brimstone. The deadbolt simply melted, and the Christ figures on the crucifixes began to laugh or weep before bursting into flames. Then the door opened, and I tried not to look, but I always did, peering over the top of my blanket to behold her sensual red and black form, gently writhing in the closet doorway. Previously, I'd shout and plead and beg for her to leave me alone, but that never worked. These days, I could only try to force my head back under the blanket, trying to ignore the horrid and beautiful and profane poses she struck at the foot of my bed, giggling her dark giggle all the while. She could have taken me, I suppose, but I don't think she ever wanted that. Instead, she wanted me to want her to want me. And in my weakest moments, sometimes I feared that's exactly what I wanted. I shut my eyes and pulled the blanket tight around my face, but my desire for her was unmistakable. Show me a man. No. Show me a person on this earth who could resist fantasizing about her lithe, red naked form, and I'll show you a liar. Her long red prehensile tail rolled across the soles of my feet, as if daring me to look upon her. I shut my eyes tighter and gnawed on my bottom lip, and the moment I began to doze, I felt her tongue flick across my earlobe, or I felt it flick across my throat, and she giggled when she felt the meager beat of my heart through my delicious carotid artery. God help me, more than once, I nearly begged for her to take a bite. When I did peek out from under the protective blanket, she grinned widely and ran her sharp talons down her supple naked frame, tempting me with the gash of her sex, an alluring sight that dripped human blood and stank of burning sulfur, yet never failed to make my mouth water. Her murder-red skin was covered in shifting black tattoos, like shadows dancing across her naked body. And while she always came at night, she was by no means limited to coming at night. I've seen her on the highway, as I was driving home from my daily commute to the liquor store, and she waved at me from the shoulder of the road, stretching her black wings wide and curling her talon, beckoning me to her. When I drank at bars, she never failed to materialize across the room, in darkened corners or peeking at me through the bathroom mirror as I took a piss. When I walked down the street, I'd catch her reflection in storefront windows, trailing mere inches behind me, licking her lips and playing with herself as I tried to ignore her and go about my business. This had been going on for years, but then something about her became different. She grew hungrier, and God help me, I couldn't help but get aroused every time I watched her feed. I never consented to this. She forced me to watch, worming her way into my mind as I slept. Though I resisted, my resolve never lasted very long, and eventually, I couldn't help but groan in delight as I slumbered, as I watched her slaughter and defile her victims. I wasn't sure where she took them, except that it appeared to be a small clearing in the forest, thick with conifer trees. At first, I thought these visions were dreams, regardless of how vivid they were. Indeed, in each vision, I could smell the metallic copper stink of warm blood. The awful screams rang out in my eardrums, reverberating down to my soul. I swore, sometimes as she peeled the flesh from their willing throats, I could even taste the fresh meat, the dangling sinew. So yes, for a time, I was able to convince myself these visions were only fantasies, either dreamed up in my own fractured mind, or deviant desires beamed into my thoughts by my unholy seductress. However, eventually I was no longer able to harbor such delusions. The first victim I knew was a coworker, another clerk from my minimum wage liquor store job. This coworker's name was Dan. I never did like him very much. He was a drunk, with a habit of sneaking drinks into stock rooms, something he always seemed to do at our peak hours when we were the busiest. One night, as I slept, I suffered yet another vision, blurry but gradually growing clearer. It was the clearing again, dead leaves littering the ground and naked conifers shivering in the wind. She walked into the clearing. Behind her, Dan followed. Though his eyes were glazed and his jaw was slackened, his face burned with unmistakable willingness as he walked sheepishly behind her, licking his lips and brandishing an erection in his pants. The thing she did to him. It was merely a murder, nor was it sexual. Instead, the vile act lay somewhere in between a perverse and violent gray area, a grisly act of copulation and defilement, during which Dan lay on the barren earth, his blood flowing over those scattered dead leaves, screaming in both agony and ecstasy as she writhed and heaved, as she pulled him apart inch by bloody inch, crowning herself with his esophagus as she gnawed slowly through his exposed viscera. The following morning, I wanted more than anything to know that it had only been a nightmare. I went into work praying that Dan would come in for his shift, but I wasn't altogether surprised when he hadn't. For a week, instead of visiting me in my bedroom, she would only come to me in my dreams, grinning up at me as she led another person I knew into the clearing. My high school history teacher, who died grinning madly as she ripped his throat out. My very first real girlfriend from college who was devoured from the bottom up, screaming in anguish for over an hour before she finally expired. My mailman, my neighbor from around the corner, my landlord, all of them torn apart, wet clumps of flesh being ripped and flung and devoured. Then, just last night, I decided I had enough. No, it wasn't that I could no longer bear witness to her vile feedings. That wasn't it at all. Instead, I found my jealousy was nearly uncontrollable. She hadn't been to my bedroom for a week, preferring instead to haunt my dreams, making me admire her lithe, nubile demonic body from my mind's eye. Funny, for years, I wanted nothing more than to be rid her nightly torment. Now that she was gone, I wanted nothing more than to have her return to me. I swallowed an unreasonable amount of over-the-counter trucker speed, caffeine, niacin, and ephedrine. My face flushed red. I paced my bedroom, my heart twitching uneasily in my chest. I stared at my closet door, praying that I'd see the murderous red glow, praying that I'd smell that stinking brimstone one more time. This time, she came in through my bedroom door. I heard the squealing hinges behind me, smelled the sulfur wafting up from her sags, heard her bare feet slipping quietly upon the hardwood floor. Then, I heard something else. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of something wet striking the floorboards. My shuddering heart seemed to drop as I somehow already knew what I was going to see. I turned around to face her. She grinned at me, gore smeared across her mouth, red on red, her eyes shimmering golden, flaring golden, like I was staring into twin morning stars. She held my mother's decapitated head in her right hand. Her sharp talons tangled in my mother's matted gray hair. I lowered my head, wiped the tears from my eyes, and muttered the words, "I've missed you so much." She took my cheek into her hand, talons resting sharply against my soft flesh, the skin of her palm sizzling against my own, and I shut my eyes tight, teeth clenched, trying not to cry out at the pain, at the melting flesh and the boiling fat. I looked up at her grinning gore-smeared face, and I swore I'd never seen anything half as stunning. She kissed me, long and soft and sensual, her tongue dancing upon my own as she slipped my mother's clotted gore into my mouth. As her lips closed around mine, she giggled an evil, vicious giggle and shot into my mind the final moments of my mother's life. Finally, she broke our kiss. My unholy seductress grinned down at me as she licked her lips clean, then her cheeks, then her chin with an elongated forked tongue the color of charred bones. She blew me a kiss and began to evaporate in a cloud of slate-colored smoke. I reached out for my seductress, screaming for her to remain at my side. Yet, my hands passed through the dissipating wisps of smoke and I fell flat on my face. And I wept for my seductress, for I knew she left me for good. Well, not entirely. As I write this, I'm fully aware that I clicked the screen off. I'd seen her in the black reflection, grinning that gore grin, hovering just over my shoulder, holding the decapitated head of a friend or a family member. Not that I have many of those left now. I know that no matter how quickly I might turn around to look, she vanished before I could even turn my naked, desperate eyes back to her supple form. I've come to realize that she has never wanted anything more than to toy with me, to pluck my strings, to make the marionette dance. Even so, I can't help but yearn for her. I can't help but weep angry tears into my pillow each night, knowing that she could visit me again if she wanted, but knowing full well that she never will. I'd almost given up on love. After 5 years of pointless scrolling, it was time to face the facts. Girls just weren't interested in nice guys like me. But then a notification popped up one morning. It's a match. Irene had soft eyes and curling brown hair that fell about her shoulders. Her smile was shy, with a hint of mischief. I thought long and hard about my opening line. I had to both strike the proper tone and make her feel special. "Hi, you seem interesting. Like someone I'd like to know better. Not like all the other girls on here." She replied a few minutes later. "That's so sweet of you to say. You seem pretty interesting yourself." Smiley face. "Do you live alone?" After a flirtatious back and forth, I asked her out to dinner. "I'd love to, but I'm working late. I'll be so hungry when my shift ends. If only I knew a handsome gentleman who could cook." Winky face. I waited for almost a full minute before replying. so as not to appear desperate. "Why don't you come over to my place tonight? I'm a great cook." Irene replied, "Sounds good, X." Boom. Just like that, I had a date. I bought a mop and vacuum to clean the apartment with and lit a few candles to set the mood. Irene messaged at about 10 p.m. "I'm outside." She was early. There's no time for a shower, and I couldn't find a single can of deodorant. Luckily, I bathed 3 days earlier. Crisis averted. I put on the Avatar: The Last Airbender original soundtrack, then dimmed the lights. I made my way to the front door, stopped at the mirror to straighten my tie, then turned the handle. Whenever I saw Irene, my heart skipped a beat. Her gray-green eyes glimmered like emeralds, and her intoxicating aroma reminded me of a freshly opened pack of Pokemon cards. She was wrapped in multiple layers of clothing, barely showing any skin at all. A rare virtue in a Western woman. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she said eventually. Her voice was confident, yet somehow submissive. I swept a hand across the apartment and tipped my fedora. "My lady." Irene kept her coat on as I guided her towards the dining room. She took a seat at my Secret Lab Omega 2020 series gaming chair while I sat facing her on a wooden one the previous owners left behind when they moved out. I asked Irene about her work, her family, and her sexual history. She gave short, curt answers to all of my questions. Periodically, her stomach grumbled. It was rather unladylike, although I held my tongue. She surveyed the room. "Are we alone?" "Yup." I smiled. "It's just the two of us." Her eyes focused on mine. "Perfect." The way she said it sent my heart rate soaring. At one point, I excused myself to begin preparing the meal. Then we resumed chatting. As we talked, Irene propped her head up using her arm and leaned forward, seductively. "What's that thing?" With a gloved hand, she gestured past my left shoulder, towards a katana mounted across the wall. "Oh, it's a Japanese sword, crafted by a master smith in Yokohama." I turned back towards her. "If you're lucky, perhaps I'll give you a little demonstration later." A few minutes later, right as I was in the middle of explaining Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life, the microwave dinged. "Excuse me." I served Irene's portion first, bowing as I laid it before her. "Bon appetit." The Hot Pockets turned out sweet and delectable. A thick celebration of cheese, meat, and vegetables. But while I scoffed mine down, Irene only eyed her plate with disdain. I swallowed a mouthful. "Is everything okay?" She bit her bottom lip and nodded as her stomach grumbled, even louder than before. I shrugged and continued eating. By the time I was finished, she'd hardly taken a single bite. "What's the matter?" I asked, a tone of concern in my voice. She rubbed her belly. "I'm not really in the mood for..." Her voice trailed off as she prodded the Hot Pocket with her fork. "I'm in the mood for... something else." She stood, circled the computer desk, and gently pressed a finger against my lips. Before I knew it, we were kissing. Irene swung over onto my lap. Our tongues acted in perfect synchronization, like Goku and Vegeta performing the fusion dance. Anticipation swelled beneath my cargo shorts. I'd been looking forward to this moment for 36 years. Irene bit my bottom lip, hard. I grimaced with pain and pulled back. Then a trickle of blood rained down my chin. She gave me a nasty smile, showing a mouthful of curved teeth. and licked her lips with a forked tongue. You taste good. Irene stood and began undressing. For a moment, it appeared as though things were looking up. Although her monstrous teeth were repulsive, I still considered Irene attractive. But then, before my horrified eyes, her clothes fell to the ground. From the neck down, Irene's body was covered with translucent skin, grotesquely colored, stretched taut over well-defined bones. Bat-like wings spanning no less than thrice the width of her body expanded. Then she pulled off her gloves, revealing long, sharp claws. A set of small, yet perfectly shaped breasts sat proudly atop her chest. My knees trembled as Irene leaned in close. Before I could react, her cold claw wrapped around my neck and lifted me from my chair, pinning me against the wall. I made a faint rasp and tried to pry her fingers off my neck. Irene's tongue probed my face as she moaned with what I assumed to be feminine delight. The edge of my vision blurred, and my temples started throbbing. Desperately, I felt along the wall, probing for something, anything, that could help. My left hand touched something metal, the katana. In one smooth motion, I grabbed it off the wall and angled it downward. The sheath fell to the floor. Irene's jaw closed around my neck, puncturing the flesh. I screamed, then twisted the blade around and thrust it into her back, right between the shoulder blades. She made a sudden cry of pain and relinquished her grip. Irene whirled around, shrieking. The blade tore a strip of flesh as I ripped it out. Before I could strike a second time, Irene flapped her wings. The left one collided with my chest, knocking me clean across the table. The jolt of the impact made me groan. Red lines trickled down my neck, stemming from the point where Irene bit me. I scrambled back to my feet, katana in hand. Irene bared her fangs. The computer desk stood between us. "Why you?" she said with fury. Green blood blossomed from her back. I took several short, quick breaths. "What the fuck is going on here?" I stammered. "Isn't it obvious?" A horrible grin broke out on Irene's face. The end of the blade wobbled in my unsteady hand. She circled to my right. I turned to follow, keeping the desk between us. "I'm here to eat you. I stalked dating sites for horny losers like you, and then I gobbled them up." Irene burst forward. A desperate flail of my blade sent her whining back. I gulped. "Gobble up? Just what the hell are you? Explain yourself." Irene leaned forward. "It doesn't matter what I am. All that matters is what you are." "Oh," I said, then gulped. "And what's that?" She grinned. "A fat 30-year-old virgin who's about to be dinner." "Like hell I'm about to be dinner," I shouted. I tried to slash, but Irene jerked back, just out of reach, and the silver blade cut only air. She took another swipe at me. I backed up a step. She swiped again and again, finding only the space above the desk. I held my breath and steadied my arms. All I had to do was watch my opponent for an opening. Each time Irene got ready to strike, her muscles tensed. That was it. The next time her muscles contracted, a delicate stroke sent her fingers flying through the air. She growled like a wounded orc and staggered back. While Irene clutched her hand and squealed, I slipped around the desk, ready to deliver a finishing blow. Her eyes focused on me with murderous intent. With her uninjured hand, Irene lashed out, forcing me backward. I answered her attacks with strikes of my own. Once, twice, a testing. There was a loud whoosh as Irene spread her wings and flew forward. "No!" I screamed, swinging wildly. The blade cut across her stomach. Anguished wails followed. Irene hit me with a meaty thump. Then we both spilled onto the floor. The katana landed between us. We both grabbed for it at the exact same moment, me getting there first. I rose. Irene looked up at me, my blade poised, calm, and ready. Green liquid pumped out of the deep wound in her stomach. She clutched it with both hands, jaws clenched. She was defeated. We both knew it. Her strength was no match for my prowess. Those countless hours cutting open bottles of Mountain Dew in my mom's backyard had not been in vain. Irene stumbled to her feet. Glistening green blood and ribbons of taut flesh dangled from where my strikes had connected. I held the katana firm with both hands. Irene's wings collapsed into her back. Then she began pulling on her clothes. Still only half dressed, she made her way towards the door. She looked back towards me with a look of utter disdain. I chuckled in response. The door crashed shut behind her. In the bathroom, I unrolled toilet paper and dabbed my wound. I stared at my reflection with pure disbelief. What were the odds my first ever date would turn out to be a hideous monster? It had undoubtedly been the second worst date of my entire life. On the counter, my phone chimed. It's a match. Excitement swelled in my stomach. The girl I matched with, Alice, was even more beautiful than Irene. Her skin was like mocha cappuccino, very exotic, very sexy. Sitting down to feast on the still warm Hot Pockets Irene had forgone, I sent Alice a message. "Hi, you seem interesting, like someone I'd like to know better, not like all the other girls on here." If I'd known further terrors lay ahead, I would have uninstalled the app right then and there, but, like a fool, I didn't. After all, what were the odds of something like that happening again?